From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. The United Nations Security Council is holding a meeting right now to discuss the extreme violence on Palestinian protesters on Monday. You are supposed to be looking at live pictures from that meeting, which is happening right now. Now, it's been called by Kuwait in response to a request from Palestine. Earlier, the Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, called the killings a war crime and said it was a tragic day for Palestinians. Mansour confirmed that at least 8 children under the age of 16 were among those killed. He believes on the basis of human rights violations, an inquiry by the Security Council is urgently needed. Now, the United Nations Human Rights Office condemned what they called the appalling deadly violence by Israeli security forces. UN Human Rights High Commissioner Rupert Colville said Israel has a right to defend its border according to international law, but lethal force must only be used as a last resort and was not justified by Palestinians approaching the Gaza fence. He has called for an independent investigation to look into Monday's events as war crimes. They're extremely worried about further bloodshed as Palestinians plan more protests to mark the Nakba. Now, Palestinians commemorate today the 70th anniversary of the creation of Israel as Nakba Day, which means a day of catastrophe. It was today in 1948 that 750,000 Palestinians were forcefully evicted from their homes. Now, this stems from the 1947 United Nations resolution that called for the partitioning of Palestine between Arabs and Jews. At present, over 5 million Palestinian refugees are spread across Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, Gaza, and the West Bank. Palestinians are expected to organize fresh and stronger protests a day after 60 unarmed Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces. And Monday marked the deadliest day for Palestinians with the highest number of casualties during a protest since 2014. Leaders around the world have expressed concern over the killing of non-violent protesters. 60 protesters were killed and over 2,500 were severely wounded when Israeli forces used live ammunition, drones, and tear gas. Mass funerals are taking place across the territory for those killed. Protests intensified after the United States opened its embassy in East Jerusalem on Monday. Palestinians consider East Jerusalem the capital of a future Palestinian state and say the choice of Nakba Day for the move was deliberate by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The protests have been going on since 2 months when Palestinians launched the Great March of Return. Since then, over 100 protesters have been killed at the Gaza border. And our correspondent Noor Harazin has more from Gaza Strip.
Today is a very sad day here in the Gaza Strip and for the Palestinian people. There is a strike, the shops, the universities, the schools are closed, the streets are almost empty. All of this happened after yesterday when 60 Palestinians were killed during the protests between the Palestinians and Israelis on the border fence between Gaza and Israel. As I said, the number of people killed in Gaza yesterday is up to 60 people and more than 2,500 injuries were reported. This day, many Palestinians are joining the funerals of those who died yesterday. One of the funerals was for an 8-month-old baby girl who died this morning after she inhaled tear gas yesterday during the protests of the Great March of Return. Today marks the 70th anniversary of the Palestinian Nakba, and tomorrow is the first day of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. However, the Palestinian people cannot celebrate this happy month. They are very sad after what happened after the massacre of yesterday.
We thank you for that report, No. And around the world, leaders have condemned the killings at the Gaza border. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan strongly condemned the brutal attack on civilians.
No matter what side you're on, whether from the United States or Israel, I condemn this humanitarian plight, this genocide. I apologize, but I also condemn those who remain silent in the face of this genocide.
And the South African government withdrew its ambassador to Israel following the deadly violence. In a statement, they said the South African government condemns, in the strongest terms possible, the latest act of violent aggression carried out by Israeli armed forces along the Gaza border. And the Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has condemned the Israeli action. He tweeted that Venezuela forcefully rejects Israel's violent reaction to the protest march against the transfer of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. In other news now, Brazilians are demonstrating against the murder of a civilian shot by a soldier in Rio de Janeiro on Saturday. Our correspondent Andres Vieira has more.
The young man was shot by a soldier who was in the city of Rio de Janeiro as part of the military intervention decreed by Brazil's president, Michel Temer, when the 25-year-old refused to stop his motorbike for a security control by the army. One of the soldiers opened fire, killing him. Social and human rights movements have condemned the army's action, as there is a recent law in Brazil that doesn't allow the use of weapons in situations where there is no danger for public security agents, like it was in this case. They are also condemning the lack of training by the soldiers who are working here in the city and in the state of Rio de Janeiro as part of this military intervention. Social movements say the objective of the military intervention has nothing to do with security and is part of a public relations strategy by President Temer to improve his image.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro continued his election campaign in the state of Táchira on Monday. With less than a week until the presidential elections, Maduro called on all Venezuelans to exercise their right to vote and said that the country must find its inner strength, starting with the grassroots communal councils and the local committees for supply and production. Meanwhile, the opposition candidate Henry Falcon campaigned in the capital city of Caracas. During his rally, Falcon promised his supporters that if elected, he will dollarize the Venezuelan economy, allow international help into the country, and release political prisoners. Our correspondent Ian Bruce has more details from the campaign trail.
Henry Falcon, the main opposition candidate, has just ended his campaign here in Caracas. They've been moving on to other states for the final days of the election campaign. Now, the numbers here don't compare with the turnout for President Nicolas Maduro's events, but he does seem to be picking up support, particularly in some of these very poor neighborhoods, which wouldn't normally be the kind of places that would be supporting the Venezuela's opposition. He repeated some of his key themes. He wants to dollarize Venezuelans' wages. He wants to open up a humanitarian channel for aid to come in from other countries. And he says he wants to release political prisoners as his first moves. Now, the polls are showing, in spite of the relatively small turnout here, that Henry Falcon has been picking up points over the last few weeks. Those polls are not very reliable, but he does seem to be making ground on President Nicolas Maduro. If, and it's a big if, he were to join forces with a third-place candidate, Javier Bertucci, then they would be very close indeed and make this election a very close-run race indeed.
Thank you for that report, Ian. The chief of the Strategic Operational Command of the Armed Forces, Remigio Ceballos, announced more than 3,000 military forces will be deployed around Venezuela from Tuesday. The army personnel will oversee the security in every polling station of the country. The announcement came just after Ceballos met with the president of the CNE, members of the public ministry, and the political parties that are participating in the electoral race. Ceballos also said they will take legal actions against those who try to sabotage the election day or disturb public order. Time now for a short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Welcome back. Chilean bishops say they feel pain and shame around the sex abuse cases involving the Chilean Catholic Church. They are holding a 3-day closed-door meeting with Pope Francis, who they say will listen with humility. Bishop Luis Fernando Ramos Perez says they will face the event with openness and a willingness to change. Bishop Juan Ignacio Gonzalez Zurias added that he wants to remove abuses of power and sexual abuses from the church.
As I said in the beginning, we come to this place with pain and shame. It's a feeling all Chilean bishops have. I think that if we feel humiliated or not, that's not relevant. The most important thing is to be able to activate everything we can do as a church, because we are at the service of the people, especially the victims who are suffering from the abuses they have lived, and to humbly cooperate in repairing the damage they have suffered.
The Pope, the Holy Father, realized he made a mistake and has offended some of the victims with his words and has asked for forgiveness. This is a wonderful example that we should want to follow. This is happening all over the world. I have been working in this field since 2003, and we would like to remove from the church, from society, and from the world the abuses of power and the sexual abuses.
Meanwhile, victims have criticized what they call hypocrisy by the Chilean bishops. Juan Carlos Cruz tweeted that Bishops Ramos and Zurias are great actors who see a totally different reality from everyone else and should return to their own planet. He accused Bishop Zurias of covering the Caradima case and trying to silence it along with other Chilean bishops. Now, James Hamilton said he was shocked by Bishop Gonzalez's capacity to lie and called him a sinister character. Both victims met Pope Francis last April. In Argentina, the negotiations between Mauricio Macri's government and the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, are moving forward. IMF officials said the two sides are looking to quickly reach an agreement. Argentina has requested a loan of $30 billion from the IMF. This type of loan offers large amounts of fast cash, but the recipient country usually has to make economic reforms in exchange for money. And our correspondent Edgardo Esteban has the latest from Buenos Aires.
United States President Donald Trump told his Argentinian counterpart, Mauricio Macri, that he will support his government during this hard economic crisis that is hitting the country. The situation is going out of control for Macri, as the dollar continues to rise against the Argentinian peso. It's important to notice that people are calling this day Black Tuesday, as bonds that correspond to more than 600 billion pesos, around $30 billion, are issued by the government. People are expecting clear answers regarding these bonds, and they demand a solution to this deep crisis. Macri's administration has sought help from international financial institutions like the IMF, as Argentina will host the G20 meeting by the end of the year. Due to this meeting, Argentina wants to show the leaders of powerful countries that it is economically strong and stable.
Meanwhile, Argentinian workers' unions are demonstrating against the increase of public services rates and the agreement that the government wants to sign with the International Monetary Fund.
The crisis doesn't end, and the increase of prices and rates keeps hitting the most vulnerable people. Making ends meet is a difficult task. Juan is desperate. He received the electricity bill, but with his salary, he knows he won't be able to pay it.
I'm really having a rough time. It's a catastrophe. Gas and water are too expensive. I don't know what the people are waiting for. This can't go on. Pensioners are getting $200 electricity bills, and with that they can't afford to pay medicines. It's a shame.
At the beginning of the week, the General Confederation of Labor said the measures against the people need to be stopped. There will be demonstrations against not only the rate increase, but also against the possible agreement between the government and the International Monetary Fund.
This is cause and effect. It is because of Macri's neoliberal business plan, and every day something else comes up. Now there is unemployment and prices increase. The truth is, it's a bleak picture.
We know what's coming next for our country, so the demonstrations from now on are going to be done to stop the agreement with the IMF. Older people know that the IMF wants to reach an agreement and convert it into a looting.
In the midst of this economic turbulence, the opposition voices are many. These voices are signs that Mauricio Macri's government is on the brink of the abyss.
The situation was already complicated before the existence of the International Monetary Fund. They always have conditions for the loans, and those conditions have always been the same: fiscal reforms and public budget cuts. We already know how it is going to be.
In a difficult time for Argentina's economy, the workers' union anticipated that they will remain in the state of alert, ready to demonstrate. If the rate hikes continue and the agreement with the IMF is finalized, they don't discard the possibility of a general strike.
Also in Argentina, the dollar price continues to increase. It has already reached 25.52 pesos per dollar. The Argentinian Central Bank tried to stop the peso's devaluation by selling another $5 million, but the move did not succeed. Analysts warn that the Argentinian government is walking on thin ice, while the chief of the cabinet of ministers, Marcos Peña, insists the country is experiencing economic growth. The Minister of Finance, Nicolas Giovone, acknowledged that the situation will incur into an inflation increase. Other news now, the candidate for Senate for the Morena party in Mexico, Nestor Salgado, demanded that the authorities guarantee security for all candidates ahead of the elections. During a press conference, Salgado said that she has already received 4 death threats via telephone, trying to deter her from returning to her state of Guerrero, along with other candidates from Morena, the party that is leading in the polls. She has asked the police to ensure their safety. More than 90 candidates have been killed during the campaign, which ends in less than 2 months.
It's unbelievable that all these candidates are dying. This election environment is really shameful for our country. It needs to stop. We need to be protected from threats. We need to demand that they won't silence us, because that is what they're trying to achieve. Despite all the threats, we are backing Guerrero, asking for no more bloodshed in the country. It's not fair for our people.
Morena's candidate for president, Andres Manuel López Obrador, has a 20-point lead ahead of his nearest rival in the race. A recent poll by El Financiero shows that the former Mexico City mayor has 46% support of voters. Ricardo Anaya is from the left-wing coalition. He stands at 26%. The third place is being held by the PRI, the ruling party, with Jose Antonio Meade with a 4-point decline for a 20% support rating. The election is scheduled for July 1st. The Nicaraguan government authorized the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to send a delegation to check on the situation of human rights in the country. The move comes after Nicaragua was hit by a wave of violent protests in the last few weeks. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dennis Moncada, sent a letter allowing the body of the Organization of American States to visit the country. He also said authorities are willing to collaborate. The National Dialogue for Peace between different social sectors and Daniel Ortega's government will soon begin. The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Rowley, has welcomed a new economic development strategy with China. Dr. Rowley said his country will actively take part in a new initiative proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping and will expand bilateral trade, investment, and people-to-people exchanges. Dr. Rowley is in China for an official visit at the invitation of the Chinese Premier Li. Now, Xi Jinping made the call when he met with Dr. Rowley during the trip. She said China is ready to strengthen cooperation with Trinidad and Tobago under the Belt and Road Initiative and help promote its socio-economic development. And Dr. Rowley said Trinidad and Tobago will actively take part in the Belt and Road Initiative proposed by President Xi and will expand bilateral trade, investment, and people-to-people exchanges. The Caribbean Court of Justice has ruled that a resident born outside of Barbados can vote in the general election. The court decided that Professor Eddie Ventros, who was born in St. Lucia and now lives in Barbados, will be added to the list of voters. The decision was made during a live link-up between Barbados and the court, which is based in Trinidad. Ventros challenged a decision by officials not to place his name among those eligible to vote in the upcoming May 24th election. The final electoral list is due out on Friday. And the media outlet Barbados Today reports that there are over 500 irregularities in the Barbadian electoral list. Most of those irregularities are in 4 constituencies in the St. Michael's area. Now, these are key seats, 2 of which are currently held by Prime Minister Frondell Stewart and the leader of the opposition, Mia Mottley. The irregularities involve voters being named in multiple constituencies. The Electoral and Boundaries Commission has responded by defending the integrity of their system. Thousands of members of Cuba's LGBT community staged a colorful parade through the streets of Havana on Saturday, marching against homophobia and calling for equal rights for the community. Mariela Castro, who is the daughter of the former Cuban president Raul Castro and heads Cuba's National Sexual Education Center, said she hopes to change mindsets. As Cuba's most prominent LGBT activist, Castro campaigned for equal marriage and said she hopes rights will be expanded in the wake of last month's Communist Party Congress.
We are working together with the state, with the party, with civil society to educate the Cuban people to change mindsets and to promote our rights.
The Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mohammad Javad Zarif, is visiting Brussels and Belgium and the European Union capital to save the nuclear deal with the European countries after the US withdrew. After his meeting with the EU's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, Javad Zarif said they're on the right track to preserve the deal. Both Mogherini and the Iranian minister are holding a meeting later with his counterparts from Britain, France, and Germany, the 3 European signatories to the landmark deal. The EU says the deal is working, pointing to UN inspections verifying the Islamic Republic's compliance with its side of the bargain. And during a previous meeting, the French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian and his British counterpart Boris Johnson insisted on their will to keep the deal with Iran alive.
Our position is one of determination and unity, and a willingness to keep alive this agreement, which required 12 years of negotiation, which is an agreement which our states have put their signatures to, and which is an agreement which allows us to avoid a spiral of proliferation.
In the UK, the bereaved families of the Grenfell Tower fire protested on Monday as Parliament debated concerns surrounding an official inquiry into the disaster. Protesters held a rally where pictures of the 71 people who died in the blaze were laid out to mark the 11th-month anniversary since the tragedy. Campaigners also called for the urgent removal of the flammable cladding from tower blocks across the country. New Caledonia, a group of islands in the Pacific colonized by France, is holding a historic independence referendum next November. Despite being nearly 20,000 kilometers from France, the country has been under French control since Napoleon III annexed the islands in 1853. Now the inhabitants will choose between being part of France or their independence. The polls are not clear and opinions are divided. French President Emmanuel Macron has said remaining in France is the only way of guaranteeing peace. But critics point to the archipelago's rich natural resources, including around a third of the world's nickel. We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellustyourtv.net/English. You should also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
Some habits pose risk to your health. Connecting mind and body can help overcome these issues. A healthy lifestyle allows us to have personal well-being and harmonious relationships. Guide your body. Tuesdays, only on Telesur. Follow the most important global events through a comprehensive perspective. A team of journalists in 25 locations around the world. 3 broadcasts to convey our people's reality. From the South. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Passion for football has come to Telesur. Join us and enjoy all this excitement. Running to World Cup Russia 2018 from the hand of number 10. Only on Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Follow the most important global events through a comprehensive perspective. A team of journalists in 25 locations around the world. 3 broadcasts to convey our people's reality. From the South.